Megan Foster never expected the 002 sentence that would change her marriage 003 to sound so calm. The freeloading ends 006 today, Luke said. He did not raise a 010 voice. He did not look angry. He said it the 013 same way he talked about new 015 policies at work or changes to his team. 018 like it was reasonable, like it was 021 logical, like it was already decided. They were standing in the kitchen of 026, their apartment. The smell of dinner still lingered faintly in the air. Megan was drying a plate when Luke spoke. I just got promoted, he added, as if that explained everything. Megan placed the plate on the rack slowly. She did not turn around immediately. She knew that tone. The tone of a man who had rehearsed fairness until it sounded undeniable. You heard me, Luke continued. We need to separate our money. I am not going to carry someone who is not pulling their weight. Megan turned to face him. 6 years of marriage, 6 years of shared bills, shared dreams, reduced to one word. Freeloader, she looked at his polished shoes, the confidence that came with a bigger title and paycheck. What do you mean? She asked quietly. I mean we need financial independence. My money should be my money. Your money should be yours. We split expenses. We keep things fair. Fair. Megan nodded once. Okay, she said. Luke blinked. He had expected tears, anger, guilt. He was not ready for agreement. Okay, he repeated. Yes, Megan said. Separate accounts. We split everything 50/50ths. That's what you want, right? Luke smiled. Relief washed over his face. Exactly. Megan turned back to the sink. What Luke did not know was that she had already started counting. Every dollar she had paid, every invisible effort she had carried while he climbed. 3 weeks from now, he would regret every word he had just said. But right now he thought he had won. And Megan let him believe it. Because Megan Foster was not the woman Luke thought she was. Luke didn't see the pause in her movements. He didn't notice the way her fingers lingered on the edge of the plate rack, tracing lines that had nothing to do with the dishes. He was smiling. Relief still plastered across his face. He thought this was simple. It wasn't for 6 years. Megan had kept things in motion, quietly, reliably. The bills paid, the appointments remembered. The home running without a sound of friction. Every grocery run, every errand, every small inconvenience that landed on him unnoticed. She had carried it, and he had never seen it, never counted it. Now everything would change the next morning. She made her coffee only for herself. Luke noticed instantly. The smell of it was familiar, but the cup in his hand was not warm the way he expected. He added instant coffee to it, stirred, and frowned. It tasted bland. He didn't say anything. By noon, he realized groceries weren't being restocked as they had always been. The fridge had half empty containers, wilted vegetables, and nothing pre-planned. Luke went to the store himself for the first time in years, returning hours later with a basket that didn't make sense, frozen meals, mismatched ingredients, and a pie that was already dented. She watched him unpack it silently. No advice, no corrections, just observation. He didn't understand the complexity of what he had taken for granted. The spreadsheet she would later create, a simple log of expenses, dates, and responsibilities, hadn't existed yet, but he was living it already. Every mistake, every forgotten item, every miscalculated meal cost would slowly teach him the weight of responsibility when he tried to cook. It was a disaster. Eggs burned, vegetables overcooked, laundry turned colors he didn't know could exist. The house didn't collapse, but the illusion of ease evaporated instantly. He looked at her once. "How did you do this every week?" She shrugged. I had no choice. That shrug was enough. No explanation was needed. She wasn't angry. She wasn't vindictive. She was simply ceasing to carry him. And he was beginning to feel the difference. 3 weeks from the bank visit, she did not change her approach. He had no choice but to manage the small details he had ignored for years. Meals, cleaning, shopping. Bills. The rhythm of a home that had always run itself now demanded him, and he stumbled over it like a man learning to walk again. At first he blamed the process. He blamed himself. He blamed the rules he had thought were fair. But gradually, frustration softened into something else. Recognition. The quiet acknowledgement that he had never truly understood what it took to make things run. The realization didn't hit all at once. It came in small increments: burnt dinners, folded laundry that wasn't perfect, and the mounting list of groceries he had misbought. Each mistake, each misstep, each error was a tiny mirror reflecting the life he had taken for granted. She didn't taunt him. She didn't comment. She just waited, and he was learning, bit by bit, that fairness wasn't simple. It wasn't a phrase to recite or a balance sheet to maintain. It was labor. It was attention. It was time. The first night he served himself, he realized just how much he had relied on her, not just for meals or order, but for the invisible scaffolding that had kept his life upright while he focused on his career. For the first time, he tasted the cost of convenience, and it was bitter. The spreadsheet came the following week. Luke stared at it on the kitchen table as if it had appeared out of thin air. The numbers were neat. Dates, items, costs, who paid. Every grocery run, every bill, every household expense meticulously recorded. The kind of record that only exists when someone has been counting for years without recognition. "This is what?" he asked, voice low, almost hesitant. "A record," Megan said, calm as ever. "To keep track." "Track what?" he asked, though he could already see the answer. "Everything," she said simply. "Every dollar, every errand, every repair. I've been doing it for 6 years." He leaned back in his chair, staring at the numbers: frozen dinners, utilities, groceries, household supplies. A running total of every small thing he had assumed just happened. He didn't speak. Megan didn't offer him comfort or apology. She didn't have to. The silence was enough. The truth was heavier than words. Why now?" he asked finally. "Because now it's fair," she said. The word struck him differently than it had when he had used it. Fairness had seemed simple, logical, obvious. Now it felt like a mirror he hadn't known existed. That night, he tried cooking again. Eggs overcooked, pasta undercooked. He realized he couldn't even judge the temperature of water without thinking about it. He scrubbed dishes until his hands hurt. He carried groceries upstairs, the bags splitting under their own weight. Each mistake was a reminder. She had done this for him, every week, every month, every year, and he had never seen it. He began to notice other things: the calendar he never touched, doctor's appointments, car service, birthdays, small gestures, invisible to him, that had kept life running, and now that he had to do them himself. They weren't simple, they weren't convenient, they were exhausting. He started to feel the strain of responsibility, not as an idea, but in his body. His shoulders ached from carrying bags. His hands burned from cleaning. His brain spun with schedules, shopping lists, and bills. He realized, in pieces, that life without her scaffolding was heavier than he had imagined. He came to the kitchen one morning, holding a coffee cup, and said nothing. She didn't look up from her laptop. He tried again. I didn't know it was like this. You never saw, she said. He nodded slowly, staring at the floor. There was no argument left. No defense, only recognition and the strange, creeping discomfort of finally understanding what he had taken for granted. The following evening, he tried again with groceries, a simple dinner, salad, pasta, bread. He misjudged everything. Lettuce wilted, pasta overcooked. He realized she hadn't just been cooking. She had been calibrating, planning, anticipating needs he never noticed. He stacked the plates on the table and sat down, exhausted, and for the first time, felt like he was learning the weight of life instead of outsourcing it. Megan watched silently. No applause. No comment. Just presence. And Luke began to understand that the cost of invisibility was real. That was the first week of his education. He didn't yet know the most powerful lessons were coming. It started with a phone call. Mom says she's coming for lunch, Luke said casually one afternoon, as if it was no big deal. Megan didn't look up. I'm not cooking, she said simply. Luke froze. What do you mean, you're not cooking, Mom? The house, the lunch, this is your responsibility now, she replied, calm, even quiet. He ran to the store. Alone, hours later, he returned with bags spilling over with items that didn't belong together. Pre-cooked chicken, a box of frozen lasagna, store-bought salad, plastic containers stacked unevenly. He tried to reheat things, but some were already cold. Some burned. The table looked incomplete when his mother arrived. She wrinkled her nose the moment she stepped in. Where's the roast? Luke opened his mouth to explain. He started, stumbled, trailed off. Megan didn't say a word. She didn't have to. The lunch was awkward, plates clattered, conversation stumbled over itself. His mother and sister glanced at him strangely, eyes flicking to Megan, waiting for her to step in. Smooth over the gaps. She didn't. She simply sat, observing. You've changed, his sister said finally, voice tight. You always let her do this. What happened? Luke tried to explain. Tried to tell them about fairness, about 50/50ths, about separate accounts. His words sounded hollow even to him. You mean to tell me the woman who runs your entire life now isn't doing it? His sister asked. Her disbelief was sharp. Not cruel, just honest. Luke sat there, realizing he couldn't defend himself. The small world he had built around convenience was gone, and he was left holding the pieces, fumbling, unpracticed, exposed. Megan watched silently. Later, when his mother called to check in, Luke's voice faltered. Everything's fine, he said. But he could hear the tension in his own tone. She knew, somehow she knew. You're learning, she said quietly. About responsibility. About what it really costs. He didn't argue. He couldn't. And in that silence, Megan's plan began to show its weight. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was simple. Legal. Social. Financial. The kind of power that comes when someone quietly refuses to carry what isn't theirs to carry. Luke had no idea how far it would go. By the end of the week, he was exhausted, not from work, not from meetings, not from his career, but from life itself, cooking, cleaning, running errands, tracking expenses, anticipating needs. Every single thing that had once been invisible was now in his hands, and he was failing slowly, quietly, in ways he hadn't imagined. Megan didn't remind him. She didn't correct him. She let him fail. She let him learn, because this wasn't about punishment, it was about revelation. And Luke hadn't even glimpsed the full extent of what he'd taken for granted. The spreadsheet arrived the next morning. Luke stared at the screen, blinking, rows of numbers, columns labeled carefully. Date, item, cost, who paid, notes. He ran his finger down a column. The total, his mouth went dry. This is everything. He asked. Everything, Megan said. Calm. Collected, Luke looked closer. Groceries, household bills, gifts, clothing, school expenses, vacati. On contributions. The little things he hadn't seen, paper towels, cleaning supplies, subscription fees, minor repairs, each line a quiet testament to the work he'd ignored. I didn't realize, he started. You didn't look, she said simply. He swallowed. Staring at the total, numbers he had never thought about before. Numbers that had kept their life running quietly. He had believed he was generous. He had believed fairness was 50-50. It's in theory. He hadn't known the effort that made it possible in reality. Megan didn't explain, she didn't lecture, she just let him sit with it. Let him confront the truth of every dollar he had assumed, every effort he had taken for granted. He opened a new sheet and started trying to add things himself, failed immediately. Groceries he'd bought were missing items, bills he'd paid were miscalculated. He stared at the screen, frustrated, exhausted, realizing he had no idea how she had managed it all. Why did you keep this? He asked quietly. To show you, she said. He didn't argue, he couldn't. Every misstep, every failed attempt to reproduce her system, every small disaster in the kitchen, the laundry, the bills, it was all evidence. That evening, he tried cooking, simple meal, eggs, toast, salad, burned eggs, wilted lettuce, overcooked pasta. He had spent 3 times what she would have. And nothing was right. Megan watched, silent, no hint of satisfaction, no triumphant smile, just observation. It was worse than punishment, it was the weight of reality, and slowly, Luke began to see, the weight of life wasn't just physical, it wasn't just the hours she spent. It was the planning, the coordination, the anticipation of needs he never noticed. Every effort had been invisible because it was seamless, because she carried it without fanfare. He finally understood that the freeloading he accused her of had never existed. He was the one who had been free. By the end of the week, he was exhausted, frustrated, humble in a way he hadn't been in years. Every small error, every miscalculated grocery run, every meal gone wrong reminded him, she had built this life. He had only inhabited it. And Megan, quietly, allowed the truth to sink in. She didn't shout, she didn't confront him, she simply stopped carrying, and for Luke, that made all the difference. 2 weeks later, his sister called. We're coming for dinner, she said casually, as if she didn't know she was about to expose him. Megan didn't respond. She was typing, focused, calm. I'm not cooking, she said finally. Luke blinked. You're not cooking. For them, this is your responsibility, she said evenly. He left for the store, a knot tightening in his chest. Hours later, he returned with mismatched groceries, some already spoiled, containers clattering as he carried them inside. He tried to assemble a meal, but nothing aligned. Salad without dressing, chicken cold, bread torn, the table looked half-finished. Amateurish. When his sister and her husband arrived, the first thing they noticed wasn't the food. It was the absence of order, the absence of preparation, the absence of Megan stepping in to smooth everything over. Luke tried to explain, We're doing 50/50ths now, he said. Separate accounts. Fairness. Independence. His sister raised an eyebrow. Wait, the woman who keeps your life running isn't doing it, he nodded, silent. She looked at Megan. You've been doing all this? Megan didn't answer. She just looked at him, calm, quiet, observant. You're telling me this, all of it, has been you? His sister whispered, incredulous. Luke swallowed. The room felt heavy. All the excuses he had rehearsed, all the logic he had trusted, fell apart. The narrative he had told himself, that he was the one providing, managing, carrying, collapsed quietly around him. They ate in silence, broken only by awkward clattering of utensils. Luke realized that his embarrassment wasn't about the food or the mess. It was about truth. The unrecognized truth of what she had done, and he had failed to see it for years later. His mother called. I heard, she said. Her voice was measured, quiet but heavy. You've been living comfortably while she carried everything, and you called it freeloading. Luke didn't argue. Words felt useless. I didn't mean to hurt her, he said quietly. Intent doesn't erase the impact, she replied. You took without seeing. That is worse. He let silence settle over the line. That night, he sat at the kitchen table, staring at the spreadsheet again. Every line, every total, every small unnoticed effort now felt like a weight pressing down on him. He could almost feel it physically. The hours of cooking, cleaning, scheduling, managing. The quiet labor of 6 years, and for the first time, he understood. Megan had built a system that let him soar without noticing the ground beneath him. And now that system had shifted. He was learning the cost of invisibility, and he had no idea how far it would go. The next morning, Luke woke to an empty kitchen. Megan had brewed her coffee, poured it, and left the cup steaming on the counter. He stared at it, the scent familiar but the warmth absent. He made his own instant coffee, added too much sugar, and spilled it down the side of the mug. He frowned. It wasn't just coffee. It was groceries, laundry, cleaning, scheduling, bills. Each task that had once been invisible now screamed at him in the quiet of the apartment. He attempted breakfast, toast burnt, eggs overcooked, fruit sliced unevenly. He realized he had never noticed how small details kept the household running. How each step required attention, foresight. Planning. He tried laundry, whites turned gray, socks disappeared, the washing machine hissed like a warning. By midweek, frustration settled in his chest. His shoulders ached, his hands were sore. He couldn't anticipate meals, couldn't track expenses, couldn't maintain the schedule Megan had held perfectly for years. And then came the spreadsheet. He opened it again, this time expecting a simple tally. But the totals, the cross-checks, the notes in tiny handwriting, every household task, every purchase, every hidden effort meticulously logged, made his stomach twist. He realized that every convenience he had enjoyed, every perfectly timed dinner, every seamless birthday celebration, every clean shirt, every memory of comfort he had carried through life, had been quietly orchestrated by her. He began writing lists for himself, grocery lists, meal plans, schedules. He miscalculated constantly. He forgot small items. He overbought. He underestimated costs. Each failure was a mirror. And Megan simply observed. She didn't intervene. She didn't correct him. She allowed him to feel the weight he had ignored. She allowed him to understand slowly that fairness wasn't just a principle. It was labor, consistency, care, every day, without applause or acknowledgement. That evening, he looked at her as she typed notes into her laptop, calm, collected, deliberate. I didn't know. He said, voice low. I didn't know it was like this. You didn't look, she said simply. He sat back, rubbing his temples. Exhaustion pressed down on him. Not from meetings, not from deadlines, not from work, but from life itself. The life he had taken for granted. He realized something he hadn't faced before. He had believed he carried the household. He had believed he had been fair. He had believed he had been responsible. He had been wrong. And the more he tried to replicate her work, the clearer it became. She had built a structure that allowed him to soar. And now, when he tried to fly on his own, he was fumbling, crashing into the invisible scaffolding she had always provided. By the end of the week, he was exhausted, frustrated, humbled. Each burnt meal, each mismanaged task, each forgotten purchase chipped away at the illusion he had lived in for 6 years. And Megan, she remained steady, calm, quiet, observant. She had not moved, not spoken, not interfered. And Luke was beginning to understand that the cost of invisibility was heavier than he had imagined. 3 weeks had passed since the bank, and he had no idea that the most revealing part of her plan was still coming. It was Sunday when the knock came. His mother, Patricia Foster. She stepped inside, her usual confident air slightly tempered. She set her bag down, sat, and folded her hands neatly in her lap. I was wrong, she said. Megan looked up slowly. Measured. Observant. I judged you without knowing, Patricia continued. I made it sound like you were a burden. Megan's gaze met hers, steady. You did, Patricia swallowed, nodding. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to undermine you. Megan waited, no reaction beyond her quiet presence. Luke watched from the side, his hands wrapped around a mug he hadn't filled himself. For the first time, he saw a shift. The woman he had accused of freeloading, the woman he had assumed needed him to manage life for her, was commanding respect silently, simply by being seen for who she was. His mother continued, voice low. I didn't realize the extent of what you've managed. Every birthday, every holiday, every meal, every detail I assumed Luke had handled. It was you. Luke swallowed. The words hit him like a stone in his chest. I've been blind, he whispered. Megan didn't reply. Not yet. Patricia nodded. You've carried him, and he hasn't seen it. Luke felt smaller. The weight he had ignored, the effort he had dismissed, became real in that room, not as numbers, not as spreadsheets, but as truth. The quiet truth of labor, responsibility, care, and consistency he had never acknowledged. You've taught him, Patricia said to Megan, even if he doesn't realize it yet. You've made him accountable in ways I could never. Luke didn't argue. He couldn't. The layers of comfort he had relied on, the illusions of fairness and independence, crumbled silently around him. Megan's calm presence, the spreadsheet, the mismanaged meals, the burnt eggs, the laundry disasters, all of it converged into a single, inescapable truth. He had taken without seeing. He had assumed without understanding. He had judged without knowing. And now, for the first time, the reality of his dependence pressed down on him in a way that was uncomfortable, inescapable, undeniable. Patricia rose to leave. You've been invisible to him for too long. I see that now. And I am sorry, she said, and for once, her words carried weight because they were honest, not rehearsed. She walked out. The silence lingered. Megan and Luke sat across from each other at the kitchen table. You see now, she asked softly. I do, he said, voice low. I see everything. She didn't smile, not yet. He had to see it fully for himself, and he hadn't, because the most revealing part of her plan, the accounting of years, the hidden financial and emotional labor, was still ahead. A folder appeared on the table one evening. She placed it there carefully, sliding it across the surface so it stopped right in front of him. "Everything is in here," she said. Even. Observant, Luke stared at it. A thick folder bulging with papers, receipts, and notes. He didn't open it at first. I don't know if I want to see it," he whispered. "You need to," she said softly. "You need to see what I've been carrying all these years, not for praise, not for revenge, just so you can understand." He opened it slowly. The first section, her income, teaching, tutoring, side jobs. The numbers were staggering. Over $350,000 in the last year alone. And all of it had gone into their shared account quietly, without comment, without announcement, without celebration. He flipped through the next section. Housing, rent, utilities. Internet, the portion she had paid beyond half. Numbers he had never questioned. Numbers he had assumed were balanced fairly without thought. Over $40,000 he had never accounted for in his mind. Food, household supplies, gifts for family, holidays, birthdays, over $30,000. And then came the final section, hours of work, counted meticulously, cooking, cleaning, scheduling, tutoring, managing appointments, running errands, the quiet labor of 6 years quantified in time and effort, 15 hours a week for meals and chores, 10 hours managing schedules and events. Every little invisible action she had taken, now written clearly on paper. Luke felt his chest tighten. He looked up at her. I didn't know, I never realized you didn't look," she said simply. He rubbed his face, swallowing hard. The magnitude of what he had assumed to be freeloading pressed down on him like a physical weight. Each number, each hour, each meticulous record was a mirror reflecting his own blindness. I don't know what to say," he whispered. "You don't need to say anything," she replied. "You just need to see it. To feel it. To understand that everything you've relied on me for, everything that made your life easy, was never free." He closed the folder slowly. The paper felt heavy in his hands. Not because of the weight, but because of the truth it carried. I was wrong," he said. Quiet, low. Not pleading. Not defensive. Just truth. Megan nodded once. That was enough. Not forgiveness, not reconciliation yet, but recognition. And for the first time, he understood. The life he had assumed was effortless had never been so. Every comfort he had enjoyed had been earned by her. And every failure he had experienced over the last few weeks, burnt eggs, wilted salads, mismanaged bills, disorganized groceries, had been a lesson, quiet, controlled, deliberate. And he had learned it. The next morning, Luke didn't rush. He sat at the kitchen table, staring at the empty counter where Megan's coffee had been. He didn't reach for anything. He didn't try to fix a meal he couldn't cook. He just sat. It felt heavy. The weight of 6 years of assumptions pressing down on him. He opened his laptop, pulled up the spreadsheet, and began to write. Grocery lists, cleaning schedules, appointments, every detail he had ignored for so long. He miscalculated at first. He forgot items. He underestimated costs. He stared at his mistakes, frustrated. Tired, humbled, he called his father. "Richard, I saw it," he said quietly. "I saw everything, the spreadsheets, the income, the hours." Richard was silent for a moment. Then, It's about time, he said, not harsh, not angry, just matter of fact. You've been living comfortably while she carried everything. And you called her a freeloader. Intent doesn't erase damage, Luke. You took without seeing. That is worse. Luke swallowed. I understand. You need to value what you have before it's gone, Richard said. The line went silent. Luke didn't argue. He couldn't. He had already begun to feel the weight of responsibility in a way he never had before. That evening, he tried cooking again. Simple meal. Eggs. Salad. Bread. He burned the eggs, wilted the lettuce, mismeasured the dressing. But he tried. And he cleaned as he went. And when Megan entered the kitchen quietly, observing, he didn't make excuses. I didn't know, he said again, quietly, sincerely. You didn't look, she said. He nodded. That was enough for now. The days passed, and slowly, he learned. He grocery shopped efficiently. He cooked meals that weren't perfect, but they were edible. He cleaned without prompting. He scheduled appointments. He tracked bills. He began to feel the difference. The quiet effort it took to keep a life running, to support another person fully, consistently. Megan no longer had to remind him. She no longer carried him. And for the first time, Luke felt the full weight of his own life, not as a concept, not as an idea, but as a tangible, daily reality. Every burnt meal, every mismanaged load of laundry, every forgotten appointment became a lesson etched into him, and for the first time, he began to understand partnership. It wasn't about fairness in theory. It wasn't about 50-50 accounts. It was about seeing, acknowledging, sharing the load, and carrying your part without expecting applause, and for the first time, he felt it. A few weeks later, Megan suggested something quietly. Your sister is coming again, she said. Dinner at 5. Luke froze. I can handle it, he said, more out of instinct than confidence. Good, she replied calmly, returning to her work. No instructions, no reminders, just trust. When Lydia and her husband arrived, Luke had cooked a simple, warm meal, not perfect, not fancy, but edible, balanced, on time. The table was set, the kitchen clean, no burnt eggs, no wilted salad. Lydia's eyes widened slightly. Wow, she said, this is really good. Luke smiled nervously, unsure how to respond. Megan sat quietly across the table, observing, calm, restrained. You've learned quickly, she said softly, almost casually. He swallowed. I had help, he admitted, gesturing vaguely toward her. Lydia laughed, but gently. It's about time, she said. You finally see what she's been doing all along. He nodded, quietly. No excuses, no defensiveness, just acknowledgement. After dinner, Patricia arrived. Unannounced, Megan didn't rush to meet her. She sat at the table, letting Patricia take in the scene. A home functioning, a son humbled, a family meal successfully prepared without intervention. Patricia's eyes softened. She looked at Megan, then at Luke. I see it now, she said. I judged without knowing. I'm sorry, Megan nodded. Once, that was enough. Recognition, respect, silent acknowledgement of years of invisible labor. Luke felt it too. The weight he had ignored, the effort he had assumed was effortless, the life he had taken for granted, it all pressed on him in full clarity. I understand now, he whispered. Megan didn't say anything. She didn't need to. The truth of her labor, her quiet power, her patient demonstration, spoke louder than words ever could. And for the first time, Luke truly saw her. Not as a helper, not as a freeloader, not as someone invisible in the background of his life, but as a partner, as someone who had carried, guided, and built the life he had taken for granted, and had chosen, deliberately, to let him learn what that work meant. The lesson wasn't dramatic. There was no confrontation, no anger, no shouting. It was quiet. It was inevitable. It was earned. And in that quiet, Luke realized something profound. Respect wasn't given, it was revealed, and Megan had revealed it with every spreadsheet, every burnt meal he had prepared, every mismanaged load of laundry, every failed attempt at running a household he had always taken for granted. He understood, fully. For the first time in 6 years, he felt the weight he had ignored, and the humility it demanded, and it changed him. Weeks turned into months. Luke's life had changed quietly, deliberately. Not because someone forced him, not because he was shamed, but because he had finally seen. He woke early some mornings to brew coffee for both of them. He made grocery lists with care. He cooked meals, simple, imperfect, but thoughtful. He cleaned without being asked. He scheduled appointments. He tracked bills. He learned. Megan didn't need to remind him. She didn't need to oversee or correct. She watched quietly, measured, calm. Her life continued balanced, even as he stumbled, as he adjusted, as he learned. And slowly, he began to feel something he had never felt before: respect. Not respect as a concept, not respect as a token word, but the lived, daily respect that comes from recognizing effort, from witnessing care, from acknowledging work you can no longer take for granted. One evening, he stepped into the kitchen while Megan was cooking. "I got offered another promotion," he said, hesitant as if revealing a secret. Megan looked up. "I didn't say yes yet," he added quickly. "I wanted to talk to you first." That stopped her for a moment. "I was never against your ambition," she said quietly. "I was against being invisible," he nodded, understanding fully now. "We can hire help. We can adjust schedules. We can share the load. That's what partnership means," she replied, calm, steady, deliberate. Later, he asked about going back to a joint account. "Only if respect stays." Megan said, "It will," he answered, and for the first time, it felt real, not a conditional truce. Not a compromise to appease, but a true understanding, built quietly. Over weeks and months of seeing, learning, and experiencing the weight of life he had never noticed. Megan had never sought to punish him. She had sought to teach, and he had finally learned. The house wasn't perfect. The meals weren't gourmet. The spreadsheets weren't optional. But Luke was different. He understood now. He carried his part. He respected the invisible work that built their life, and Megan, she had finally been seen. One evening, I watched him make coffee, not the hurried, careless coffee of a man who assumed life would take care of itself. This was deliberate, measured, thoughtful. He poured, stirred, cleaned as he went. He didn't ask. He didn't expect me to. I sat at the table and simply watched. 6 years, 6 years of unnoticed work. 6 years of carrying, planning, anticipating, absorbing stress so someone else could soar. And for the first time, I was allowed to step back. To let him carry, to let him see, to let him learn what it means to be truly responsible. He looked up and caught my eye. A small nod. No words needed. The house felt different. Not quieter, not louder, not brighter or cleaner. Just balanced, shared. Alive in a way it had never been before. Patricia came over one Sunday afternoon. She sat across from me, folded her hands, quiet, hesitant, respectful. I was wrong, she said softly. I judged you without knowing anything. I waited. Observant. I told Luke things I shouldn't have, she continued. I made you sound small, I nodded once. You did, she swallowed. I'm sorry. It was not loud, not dramatic, but it was real. I allowed the moment. Not triumph, not vindication, just acknowledgement. Luke stood nearby. Watching. Silent. But different. Not the man who assumed. Not the man who judged. Not the man who relied without seeing. He had learned slowly. Carefully. Deliberately. We hadn't gone back to a joint account yet. We hadn't erased the past. But we had rebuilt something better. I got up and poured myself a cup of coffee. He followed. Some stories end with someone walking away. This one ended differently. It ended with two people learning to finally see each other. And in that quiet, I realized something essential. The strongest revenge is not leaving. Not shouting. Not proving a point. It is refusing to be invisible. And once you refuse, once you insist on being seen, the world and those who thought they could ignore you finally adjusts. I smiled faintly. He nodded. No words, no explanations, just recognition, and for the first time in 6 years. It felt like justice, quiet, real, irrevocable. I watched him pour the coffee, the way he measured the water, the way he stirred slowly, carefully, and cleaned as he went, not perfect, not rushed. Not the way I had done it for 6 years without thought, but deliberate, thoughtful, his effort. Tangible. I sat at the table and simply observed. 6 years of invisible labor, of planning, of absorbing stress so someone else could soar, finally acknowledged, finally seen. And for the first time, I could step back and just let him carry, let him learn, let him understand. He caught my eye. A small nod. No words, no excuses, no explanations, just recognition. That was enough. The house felt different. Balanced. Alive. Not because it was cleaner or quieter, not because the meals were perfect, but because the effort was shared. The weight was no longer mine alone. Patricia came over later that day. She sat across from me quietly, hesitant, folding her hands in her lap. I was wrong, she said. I judged you without knowing. I made you sound small. I nodded once, simply. No triumph. No gloating. Just acknowledgement. Luke stood nearby, silent, watching. But he was not the man he had been. He had learned slowly. Carefully. Irrevocably. We hadn't returned to a joint account yet. We hadn't erased the past. But we had rebuilt something stronger. Something grounded. Something real. Some stories end with someone walking away. This one ended differently. It ended with two people learning to see each other. Really see. Not as assumptions. Not as conveniences. Not as invisible labor to be taken for granted. The strongest revenge is not anger. Not confrontation. Not proving a point. It is insisting on being seen. And once you are seen, quietly, steadily, without drama, the world and those who thought they could ignore you finally adjusts. I smiled faintly. He nodded. No words. Just recognition. And for the first time in 6 years, justice didn't need to shout, it didn't need applause, it simply existed, quiet, real, irrevocable.